So help us understand with the president's announcement. Many have argued that this decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel contradicts international law, UN resolutions with regard to Jerusalem specifically.
Well, look, the president's decision conforms with American law. Since 1995, U.S. law has said that the president must declare Jerusalem the capital of Israel. There have been successive Congresses that have continued to reaffirm that law. The president took action which just affirmed what Congress and the will of the American people has stated for decades. And look, the policy makes sense. We've been, for now several decades going to Israel and negotiating, and we've been pretending we don't know where the Israeli capital is. It's in Jerusalem. It's where the Supreme Court is. It's where the parliament is. It's where the prime minister resides, and it's where the capital is. So a recognition of reality, we think, makes the most sense.
Let me try and get a finer point on this, because when the president mentioned Jerusalem, he didn't say and recognize it as an undivided city. Does it mean that in a peace process that's sponsored by the United States, does it mean then that Jerusalem could be on the negotiating table as part of a peace process?
Look, borders, sovereignty, these are the types of issues that are going to be part of final status negotiations, where all the parties are going to have a role and have to negotiate a final settlement. So that's the decision yesterday has nothing to do with that, and we're going to allow the parties to work out the details there.
So was the language very specific then in terms of the selection of the president using the phrasing that he did?
Of course it was. Again, this was about a recognition of reality and not about putting our finger on the scale in the peace process. We are an honest broker, and we want the first word of being an honest broker is being honest and recognizing reality that Israel's capital is Jerusalem.
But many are arguing that just the opposite is being inferred from this, that the U.S. is not an honest broker, that in a sense it has taken a side.
Well, look, the peace negotiations that the U.S. has been involved in now for several months, the president is aware of all the details, but they're not public. They've been confidential, and the president is optimistic about the possibilities for peace precisely because they've been kept confidential. So I wouldn't assume anything about what happened yesterday and all the context surrounding it. We're optimistic about the possibility for peace, and the president is pursuing it.
When the president met with 50 Islamic leaders months ago, there was a rapport that was developed. Does the president recognize that this decision could put those 50 leaders that he met with in a very difficult position with their own populations?
Well, we think that the United States, under this president, has developed a really good relationship with those countries and those leaders. And it goes beyond the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. It goes toward fighting ISIS and terrorism throughout the region. It goes toward combating Iran's influence throughout the region. So our relationships with countries like Turkey and Saudi Arabia and others in the region expands beyond the Israeli-Palestinian dispute. And look, we are partners for peace. We want to work with both parties and the parties in the region toward a lasting peaceful solution. We don't think yesterday's decision is a deterrent to that.
What about the relationship with the King of Jordan, for example? I mean, a key U.S. ally, particularly in the fight against ISIL. There was cautioning by the Jordanians for the president not to do this. And now that he has, the reaction has been that there's a feeling that they've been deeply disrespected. Is there concern about maybe some other foreign policy goals being jeopardized as a result?
We don't think so. We think that the president's action was clear and, again, reflected American law. And we've seen for several decades, the opposite. We thought for decades that not recognizing Jerusalem as the capital would lead to peace. It hasn't, right? The results speak for themselves. We're trying a different approach, and that is being an honest broker, being honest on the front end of that, and trying to recognize reality, which is what we think all the parties need to do to move forward.
Is there concern that the president's decision, though, may have strengthened Iran's position in the region and perhaps some of the extremist groups that he's been trying to fight?
We don't think so at all. We think that the coalition against Iran and against their influence throughout the region in many countries is strong. I think that many of those countries are, frankly, more self-interested in combating Iran and its influence, and the United States is going to work with them in that process.
We know that the vice president is headed to the region later this month. What message is he going to send in some of those bilateral meetings that he's going to be holding?
Well, he's going to send the message that the United States is pursuing a peace agreement, that we are partners in peace, and that the United States and the president cares as much about the future of Palestinian children as he cares about the future of Israeli children. We want a peaceful settlement that is in the best interest of Israelis, of Palestinians, of Jordanians, of Saudi Arabians, of every country in the region. Peace is the goal that we all want.
We know the president is an avid watcher of television news. Has he been watching the international reaction, and what is his take on what he's been seeing?
Well, I think that the president has been happy with the reaction, has understood that obviously there's going to be some disagreement, but when you recognize reality and you speak honestly to friends and are straightforward with the reality on the ground in Israel, we have better prospects for success.